If you've ever driven along Minnesota's North Shore in early summer, you've probably seen them. Tall spires of blue and purple flowers swaying in the breeze, lighting up rocky cliffs and roadside ditches like colorful watercolor brushstrokes. These are lupines, and while they may look timeless, the lupines we see today are not quite the same ones that first grew here. Today, we're exploring the history of lupines in Minnesota, where they came from, how they changed, and why that difference matters.
Today, we're talking about winter sowing, which is exactly what it sounds like, planting seeds in winter and letting nature handle the timing. It's simple, budget-friendly, and surprisingly effective, especially for gardeners in cold climates like us in Minnesota. If you've ever wanted an easier, low-stress way to start seeds, this might just be the new favorite gardening trick for you.
Hello and welcome to the Petal and Plot Pod, a seasonal plant stories and garden tips podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Anissa.
This is Eric.
Lupines belong to the lupines genus. Sorry.
This is going to take us a while.
I have just... I'm going to say lupinus, okay?
Is that how it's actually said?
Oh, remember, there's no wrong way to say it.
I know, but in this case, I feel like you want to at least say it.
I can't say lupinus genus, Eric.
Wait, is it Lupinus?
US? Yeah. I think lupines belong to the lupinus genus.
Assuming that's right.
It's
like it says it's lupinus.
It does? Perfect.
Like
okay, here we go.
Like pie.
Gorgeous, beautiful, so grateful. Okay. Lupines belong to the lupinus genus, part of the legume family, the same family as beans, peas, and lentils. Like other legumes, lupines form partnerships with bacteria in their roots. These bacteria allow the plant to convert nitrogen from the air into nutrients in the soil, a process known as nitrogen fixation. For our ecosystems, this made lupines pioneers. They could grow where the soil was thin, rocky, or newly exposed, improving the land for other plants that followed. Before roads, railways, or state lines, Minnesota was home to native lupine species, adapted to specific habits. The most important of these was the sundial lupine, Lupinus perennis. Sundial lupines were smaller and more delicate than the lupines that we often see today. They grew low to the ground, with shorter flower spikes and fewer blooms. Instead of dominating landscapes, it blended into prairies and oak savannas and sandy soils. This native lupine supported specialized wildlife. Most notably, it is the only host plant for the federally endangered Karner blue butterfly. The caterpillars depend entirely on native lupine leaves to survive. For thousands of years, native lupines lived in balance, coexisting with fire, grazing, and nutrient-poor soils without overwhelming other species. Do you have lupines in your yard, Eric?
I do. I have one that I inherited from my mom from her garden.
You do?
And
That's so cool.
yeah, others that I've picked up and now have. There's a red one and a yellow one.
Yeah, I've always loved going up north and seeing lupines. They often make me think of going up to see my grandmother up north and just like the road trip at that time of year. It's just so pretty.
Yeah. Native ones are even prettier, I feel like, when you get to see them out and about in mass.
Yeah. Have you seen them in the wild very often?
A little bit. I feel like when I've gone up north, I've seen some.
Yeah, so the native lupines from Minnesota were pretty small. The tall, showy lupines aligning Minnesota highways today are usually large leaf lupines, Lupinus polyphyllus. Unlike native sundial lupines, large leaf lupines are much taller and produce a denser flower spike, and they spread aggressively through seeds and underground growth. It was introduced intentionally and unintentionally during European settlement, often planted for erosion control, landscaping, and roadside stabilization. Because it fixes nitrogen so efficiently, large-leafed lupine changes soil chemistry in places where plants evolved under low nutrient conditions. This shift can allow aggressive species to take over. As a result, large leafed lupines can crowd out Minnesota's native wildflowers, including the native lupines themselves. While large leafed lupines provide nectar for pollinators, they do not replace the ecological role of native lupines, especially for species like the Carner blue butterfly. This has led conservationists to carefully manage where large leaf lupines are allowed to grow while restoring native lupine populations in prairies and savannas. So after I read that, I was suddenly like, I don't know if I have seen a native lupine. Like I've seen the really tall ones like along the highways and stuff, but the little short ones in fields,
Right.
I think I might need to look into that a little more.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think probably what I've seen too are the larger ones, which is really interesting when you always hear the complexity of when something's going to take over, as a new hybrid or cultivar of
Mhm.
things and the effect that has just in the natural environment sometimes. Um, yeah, I didn't know that. Now I'm going to be looking for the little lupins.
Yeah, right? And I've heard people up north say that lupines are, invasive because of how much they sort of, like, take over certain areas, and I was surprised
Mm,
to hear that this was, like, years ago because I'm like, "Wait, aren't they kind of like this sort of, like, icon of Northern Minnesota?" Right? So to think of them
yeah.
as invasive seemed really strange, but now I feel like I understand that a little bit more because the native ones sort of coexist with all the other native plants, whereas these larger ones that kind of came over from Europe start to take over the other native stuff, and, I mean, they
Yeah.
look really cool, though,
You kind of I
while
feel
they're
like my I
doing
think
it.
of yeah, I think of my lupins in the garden and I'm like, I wish it would take over,
Yes,
like
please. Me too.
just
I've
not
every year I
invasive
try to get
enough,
more to grow.
but the reality is, it can be so much different in a manicured garden than it is out in the wild. So
100%,
fascinating.
100%. Yeah, across Minnesota, land managers now use prescribed fire, seed restoration, and selective removal to bring back native lupines where they belong. In some places, large leafed lupines were made part of the landscape, valued for their beauty and soil stabilizing abilities. But in others, they're carefully removed to protect rare ecosystems. So, if lupines are legumes, are they edible? How do we find out? Should we try it?
You go first. I feel like I don't think they are. I feel like
Yeah.
unless only portions, but my guess is they're not. I think they're actually have poisonous in nature.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The short
Okay.
answer is some lupines are edible, but many are not. Lupines naturally produce bitter alkaloids, chemical compounds that protect them from insects and grazing animals. In high amounts, though, these alkaloids are toxic to people and livestock. Most wild lupines in Minnesota, including the native sundial lupine and large leafed lupine, are not safe to eat. Just want to clarify that for our listeners out there. Eating them without proper preparation can cause nausea, dizziness, or more serious poisoning. And for this reason, lupines were never a common wild food source in the upper Midwest. But while Minnesota's lupines weren't used as food, lupines have a long culinary history elsewhere. In the Mediterranean, parts of South America, and the Middle East, certain species, especially the Lupinus albus or the white lupine, were carefully cultivated as crops. These lupines were processed through soaking and repeated boiling to remove their bitter alkaloids. The resulting beans were eaten as snacks, ground into flour, or used as animal feed. This selective breeding eventually produced sweet lupines with low toxin levels, very different from wild lupines found growing along Minnesota roadsides. And I have heard too that some people will take toxic nuts or even toxic mushrooms, and by boiling them repeatedly and like changing up, like boiling them 3 times in fresh water, will process them in a way that you can ingest them without getting sick from them. Although that does seem like a lot of work just to try to eat poison, Like,
Yeah.
but I guess desperate times call for desperate
If
measures.
exactly. If it's the last thing to eat in the cupboard, I guess you know how to
Yeah,
properly prepare them.
yeah,
I
we'll
was going
boil
to
it 3
ask you
times.
when you said like there's a process for it that now it makes sense. I feel like there's a lot of things out there even if they're not poisonous that dilute that bitterness.
Hmm.
that you might have, which is interesting to see.
Yeah, I've heard of
Similar.
people taking acorns, which are not edible as they
Mhm.
are, but by boiling them 3 times, you can then ground them into flour and then use it as like
Mhm.
a flour. And then people who want to experiment with eating Amanita muscaria mushrooms, which is technically poisonous, again, you can boil it multiple times and render it a little bit more safe.
I was just thinking like Brussels sprouts, which are totally not poisonous, yet I still, because of their bitterness, want to like blanch them and go through that process of with water,
Uh,
right?
yeah,
So
that's
I
true.
have not
Yeah.
had those experiences, Anissa, but those are interesting to hear.
So, the next time you see lupines growing blue or pink or purple in the Minnesota sun, remember they are legumes, but not beans. They enrich the soil, but not the stew pot, and they feed ecosystems, even if they don't feed us.
All right. So today, we're talking about winter sowing, which sounds like something only very brave or very bored gardeners do, but it's actually one of the easiest, most forgiving ways to start seeds. And honestly, it feels a little rebellious. Like we're
Ooh.
planting seeds in the winter and no one can stop us. So
We're doing it.
we're
We're
doing it
gardening.
because this is what we need to do. We need some
It
gardening
might
in
only
our
be
life,
2 degrees outside,
but we're going to do it. Yes.
but we're going to
So,
sow some seeds.
Anissa, when you first heard the phrase winter sowing, what did you picture?
I mean, it just sounds like surrealism, you know? Like you're out there in a snowy field sprinkling seeds. Like that's the first thing that would come to my mind.
Exactly.
Surrealism.
Yeah. I think I felt like I'm going out and furrowing the ground, but it's instead of soil, it's snow. And I'm definitely picturing like frostbite during the situation, right? So, like, winter sowing is planting seeds outdoors in the winter, usually in containers, and letting them experience real winter conditions: snow, freezing, thawing, the sunshine, wind, all of it. Instead of like grow lights and seed trays inside, you let nature handle timing and temperature. And for gardeners in Minnesota zone 4 or 5 here, this makes so much sense because winter isn't unpredictable. It's very committed to being here. So,
Mhm.
uh, would you say, Anissa, winter sowing feels more like working with nature instead of trying to control everything?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like if we weren't hand sowing seeds, they would be sowing themselves somewhere. Like lupines, for example, are gonna sow themselves by seed in the wild. You know, they've
Hmm.
gone through that cold winter.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of like letting go of control, right? Which sometimes actually just makes better plans than what we may try
Tougher.
to do and force happen, right? Um,
Mhm.
so a big reason winter sowing works is something called cold stratification, which sounds fancy, but it just means that seeds need a cold period and a moist period before they'll germinate. And so a lot of perennial and wildflowers expect winter before they grow. Anissa, have you heard of trying to start seeds indoors that technically needed cold stratification and just thought, why do these hate me? Like, why do I have to do an extra step?
Mhm. I think when I even first heard about it, I didn't even, like, believe it. I'm like, "That can't possibly be true." I think the first time I'd heard about it was because somebody was putting seeds in their freezer.
Yeah. I think I probably heard of stratification on a seed before I thought of like winter sowing. And so I did the same thing. I threw it in to my refrigerator, which also is the same cold period. Doesn't have to be a freezer if you are working with that, and waited the time and then did all my work indoors. When afterwards I was like, oh, I could have just like thrown this out in the garden today and have winter do its work here, since we benefit in Minnesota by having that cold period. So, yeah. So, lesson
Definitely.
learned now when I see things with stratification on the label or needs a cold period, we're lucky to have it in a sense here already and let nature help us. So, I think the traditional way most people think of winter sowing, they think of the milk jug method. And so, it's important that whatever you're using is like a clear plastic or something so sunlight gets through. You have a cut open for drainage holes. You put soil in, you put your seeds in, lightly cover them or mildly cover them depending on the seed type, which usually is on the seed packet. You tape it up around and you leave the hole open on the side so that, or on the top, so that water, rain can still come into the container and then outside they go, right? So you've basically created a tiny greenhouse out of recycling. Anissa, have
Cute.
you
Tech
played with
greenhouse.
milk jugs? Do you think the average winter sower ends up hoarding milk jugs in February, or what's been your experience?
Yeah, I haven't done that, but I have a number of neighbors that do that. And so sometimes they'll even put a little message out on a neighborhood chat asking people to
Mhm.
drop off milk jugs when they finish them so that they can use them for their gardens. I have seen them out as I walk the dogs on the people's front yard. There's just this little line of milk jugs that have been
Mhm.
cut in half and then duct taped back together. But yeah, I like
Yep.
it's fun to see it around.
Yeah. I I actually when I started doing winter sowing, I didn't have milk jugs and I thought that's what I needed to have since I've learned you can
Hmm.
pretty much use anything. Strawberry plastic packets that you get from, produce or even Ziploc bags, all just creating that same functionality is all you need. But I actually had gone to Starbucks or your local coffee house because many times they're using those milk jugs and I just asked them if they would hold it for a day and literally came back with like a huge garbage bag full of just like milk jugs to use. So I had like
Oh,
instantly
brilliant.
like 20, 25 milk jugs to use and they at least locally for me they were perfectly fine allowing that as long as I called them, set up the pickup time and arrived. Otherwise they toss them out with the recyclings.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say, other than those different types of pots you can use and or Ziploc bags, like I said, it's also important to think about where you place it outside. And I know that sounds kind of funny because I did just say like just toss it outside, like it doesn't matter. But it's actually best to make sure you put it kind of out in the open where the sunshine and rain can actually get to it. Some people put it up against their house or up next to a fence or under an awning. And the reality is, your rain or sunshine may not get to your seedlings as well. Many times, that first foot next to a building or something is actually really dry because the reality is, rain and precipitation does not fall straight down from the sky. It's usually at angles. And so I always just say that as an FY. Some people think, oh, I'm keeping it nice and tidy in this space. But honestly, if you can put it out in the broad open areas, that is even better. So
Get that
um,
sunlight.
get that sunlight exactly. The other thing other than planting in milk jugs is, winter sowing can also just be like direct winter sowing. And so maybe this feels like for the bold gardener, but it's kind of what nature does anyways. So you scatter your seeds directly on your prepared beds in winter, maybe just before the ground starts to freeze and snow arrives is great. And this is really great for like natives and pollinator gardens and just kind of let nature decide in a sense like who survives. You'll be surprised actually on your germination rate and what comes up in the next year. But I've done that a few times. I know with some of my annuals or perennial flowers that I've grown. Have you done the same, Anissa, with like
I
your
have,
direct
yeah,
sowing?
because there are quite a number of wildflowers that you can throw seeds on the ground in the fall. I mean, I've even like when I've gone on for walks in the fall when the seed heads are everywhere, I pass by this giant bed of echinacea or something, I'll just grab a few seed heads, and then when I get
Mhm.
home, just sprinkle them in my boulevard, and,
Mhm.
yeah,
Magic.
magic.
My favorite is poppies, and poppies are even like that much more cooler because you can actually have snow on the ground. You can literally just sprinkle the seeds on top of the snow, and as it melts down, it actually will touch the ground and then also start growing. I feel like poppies are like the easiest thing to just throw out and have something growing. Sometimes I think of just
Mhm.
carrying loads of poppy seeds with me on walks and just spreading poppies across the neighborhood, right?
Guerrilla gardening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do that with my puppies too. Like I'll in the fall, I'll clip the seed heads off and then sprinkle them somewhere. And I will say, I think Poppies have the best seed pod on earth. Like, it's so
Yeah.
cool looking. It's a little tiny rattle. It just looks like it's architectural. Like, I just love their seed heads.
Yeah. I will say from experience that they're super easy to get. And as soon as they start to dry and rattle, it's good to collect them versus wait until the fall time. I learned this the hard way. If you have chipmunks or squirrels, many times they will find those seed heads and eat them. And so all of a sudden you may go out and be like, where are all my poppy seeds? The reality is nature is already taking them.
I feel kind of inspired now to collect poppy seeds to make poppy seed bread with or something. That would be
Mm.
you would need a lot though, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of seeds in a little pod.
Yeah.
So so let's ground in like the specifics of like because knowing what to winter sow kind of helps build confidence. And many times, like I said, if you find a seed packet that says stratification or needs a cold period, that's a great indicator. If it's a native, more than likely. So to name a few flowers like poppies, like we talked about, cone flowers, black-eyed Susans, milkweed, bee balm, columbine, lupine, like we talked about today. Although sometimes with lupine, you sometimes want to do a scarification on the seeds because it's actually a really hard coating. But if you leave it out through the winter, that'll break down. Out of these, Anissa, which ones would you tell a beginner to start with? Like what have you had experience with that has always been reliable?
I guess I feel like the easiest one would maybe be black-eyed Susans.
Mm.
Because I just think they're so prolific that they're pretty easy to grow. I don't know, how about you?
I mean, poppies definitely, but I would probably also throw columbine in that thing. I feel like anytime seed has fallen from my columbine, I get those like everywhere. And so I get my choosing of where to plant them. Plus, they're easy to like transplant. So if they come up in a spot I don't want, they're easy to move around.
Oh, that's a good idea. I haven't done that with my columbines, but my columbine does it sort of migrates around the yard too. I don't
Yeah.
know.
The other thing I wasn't thinking about in this, and I haven't tried this, so this is maybe my learning and to do, is herbs or cool season vegetables in a sense
Mm.
to do winter sowing or, very late winter when there's still some snow or the ground really hasn't been worked yet. Herbs like parsley, dill, chives, oregano, mint, which I know you grow around,
Oh, yeah.
can be winter sown. And then like cool season vegetables like the spinach, kales, lettuce, broccoli, cabbage, those brassicas and lettuces are other great ones. It's almost thinking of like the types of herbs and vegetables that like cool season growth or, like shade in some cases to grow well are great ones to use for winter sowing.
Well, would you like to hear a listener question, Eric? Dylan writes in and asks, I would like to experiment with cold stratification, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do in the springtime. When it starts to get warm out, should I let them sprout in the container or should I move them somewhere?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say you definitely let them grow so that they are getting their true leaves. So always when seedlings come out, they have fake leaves, if you will, that start out or cuttings. And then from that
Mm-hmm.
appears the main primary leaves that the plant will have. Usually they're different and distinctive. And so you want to at least have, I would say, 1 to 2 sets of those leaves. And then I think it just depends on being aware of anything weather-wise happening. I think that's a balance that's hard to call out, but I would say being aware of your last frost date, usually with cold stratification and those hardy plants, they're fine for initial frost, but I sometimes like to just be aware to protect them if that's the case, because they can start growing faster in those little greenhouses than they would outside. And so pay attention to the weather. If we feel good, open it up and let more air in. Just be aware that it might dry out faster. And then as soon as that is the right spot that you can go ahead and plant out, I would plant it out into your garden. You can break them up usually a little bit, be aware of a few different types like lupines and others that have really deep tap roots. The sooner you can get them in the ground, the better because they don't like being handled. Poppies are the same and letting their roots get exposed, if you will, to air. So keep tight bundles of the soil around the roots and plant them from there.
Awesome.
So winter sowing is low pressure, budget friendly, and incredibly rewarding. And worst case, You learned something. Best case, you open a milk jug in April and discover tiny green victories and maybe a whole lot of poppies. So thanks for listening to us on Petal and Plot. If you try winter sowing this year, tell us what worked and what surprised you. Until next time, keep planting, even when the snow says otherwise.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
If you have a gardening question you'd like us to answer, please write to us at petalandplot@gmail.com. That's PETALNPLOT. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and click the follow button to hear our next episode.
As garden designers here at Petal and Plot, we also offer year-round in-person and virtual gardening consultations and custom garden designs as well. Please reach out to us if you'd like to set one up. Want to see more of what we're up to? Please follow us on Instagram at Petal and Plot. That's PETALNPLOT.